The 44th floor of Meridian Capital Partners was the kind of place where every surface gleamed and every person smiled with their teeth, but never their eyes. The conference rooms had glass walls so everyone could see you, and the open-plan floor meant everyone could hear you too, which was exactly the kind of architecture that made cruelty feel communal. Nadia Ose worked on the 31st floor in the compliance division, where the lighting was fluorescent and nobody had a window view. She had worked at Meridian for 6 years. She had caught 3 separate instances of internal fraud in those 6 years. She had been passed over for promotion twice. She was 31 years old, wore her natural hair in a large, rounded puff that her manager once described as a lot, and she carried herself with the particular stillness of someone who had learned that taking up space was something other people got to do. On the morning everything changed, she was eating a granola bar at her desk at 7:43 a.m. because the kitchen on 31 didn't stock breakfast items before 8, and she had a compliance audit due at 9. Nadia, her supervisor, Glenn Hopper, appeared at the edge of her cubicle. He had the look of a man who had been handsome 20 years ago and had never fully accepted that the window had closed. "We need you upstairs. 44. Right now." She looked at her screen, then at him. "My audit. 44, he said again, as if repeating it would explain something. It didn't. The elevator ride took 40 seconds. Nadia counted them. The 44th floor smelled different. Cedar and something cold, like the air had been specifically engineered to feel expensive. She stepped out and immediately understood that she had been brought here not because she was wanted, but because she was needed. And those were entirely different things. 6 people sat around the main conference table. She recognized the CFO, a woman named Harriet Bloom, who had once walked past Nadia in the lobby without acknowledgement, despite standing next to her for 45 seconds. She recognized 2 board members whose names she could never remember because they were the kind of men whose names you were supposed to already know. She did not recognize the 3 men on the other side of the table. The one in the center did not belong in a conference room. He belonged somewhere with higher ceilings. He was dark-haired, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that had clearly been made for him and no one else. He had tattoos visible just above his collar, the edge of something geometric climbing his neck, and the kind of jaw that suggested he had never in his life apologized for anything. He was looking at a document in front of him when Nadia walked in, and he did not look up. "Miss Ose," said Harriet Bloom, her voice the careful, warm neutral of someone managing a situation. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." Nadia sat. Across the table, the man in the charcoal suit finally glanced up. His eyes were very dark, very still, and they moved over her face with a quality that was not rude and was not kind but was something more uncomfortable than either. It was thorough. "You flagged a discrepancy in the Ashworth account in March," he said. Not a question. "Yes. And again in the Delacroix Fund in April. Yes, both were closed without action. That's correct." He leaned back. Something shifted in the quality of his attention. "Tell me what you found." Harriet Bloom made a small noise. "Roman, perhaps we should, Mims." "Ose," the man said again, and his voice had the particular quality of someone who finished other people's conversations by ignoring them. "Tell me what you found." His name was Roman Varro. Nadia would learn that over the next 4 hours, along with the fact that he controlled somewhere between 30 and 40% of the private financing flowing through the northeastern corridor of the United States, and that the 3 men sitting with him were not associates so much as they were a governing body, and that Meridian Capital Partners had been, for approximately 18 months, laundering money for a competing syndicate operating out of the Gulf Coast. She would also learn that someone inside Meridian had been feeding that syndicate information, and that Roman Varro already suspected who. But in the moment, she just told him what she found. She talked for 9 minutes without stopping. She pulled up documents on her tablet. She showed him the pattern, the way the transfers had been routed through 3 intermediary accounts, how the timing always coincided with the last Friday of the quarter, when the senior compliance officers were in their weekend golf rotation, how the amounts were always just below the threshold that would trigger an automatic flag, which meant someone who understood the threshold had designed the system. When she finished, the room was quiet. Roman Varro was looking at her the way people sometimes looked at something unexpected, in a place they thought they already understood completely. "You brought this to Hopper," he said, "twice. He told me I was overcomplicating it. And Bloom—" Nadia glanced at Harriet Bloom, who was examining a point somewhere slightly above the table. "Once," Nadia said. Another silence. Then Roman said, "How long have you been in compliance?" 6 years. Title: Senior Analyst. The way he said nothing after that was the loudest thing in the room. The meeting ended at noon. Nadia was told to return to her desk and say nothing to no one, which she did, because she had spent 6 years at Meridian learning that saying things produced very few results. Glenn Hopper found her at 2 p.m. "Whatever you told them up there," he said, keeping his voice low and positioning himself in her cubicle doorway in the way he always did when he wanted her to feel small. "You need to understand that you're stepping into something way above your pay grade. Leave the big picture to the people who understand the full context." Nadia looked at him for a long moment. She thought about 6 years. She thought about the Ashworth report she had filed in March, the Delacroix flag in April, the earlier Fontaine discrepancy the year before, that had disappeared from the system so cleanly she'd started to wonder if she had imagined it. She thought about how the full context had a funny way of meaning, "Please be quiet." "Okay, Glenn," she said. He left. She opened her drawer and started quietly making copies of everything. The second time she encountered Roman Varro was not in a conference room. It was 7:15 in the evening, 3 days after the 44th floor meeting, and she was standing outside the Meridian building, waiting for a rideshare that was 9 minutes away, which felt like a personally targeted inconvenience. She was holding a coffee cup that had gone cold 20 minutes ago and wearing the expression of someone whose brain had not fully stopped working, despite the fact that her shift had technically ended 2 hours ago. "Your car is 9 minutes out," said a voice beside her. She turned. Roman Varro was standing 4 feet to her left, also apparently waiting, though he had the quality of a man who did not really wait for things so much as he briefly permitted them to conclude. "How do you know that?" "You're looking at your phone, the way people look at their phones when a rideshare is between 8 and 10 minutes away," he said. "There's a specific expression." She stared at him. "That's an odd thing to notice." "I notice things." It was a strange sentence, and he said it simply, without performance. A black car pulled up not for her but for him. He didn't move toward it immediately. Instead, he looked at her with that same thorough quality from the conference room. "You're not safe in that building right now," he said. "I'm aware. Are you?" "I've been aware since April," she said. "I've just been trying to figure out what to do about it." Something moved across his face. Not quite surprise, not quite admiration, but something adjacent to both. "Get in?" he said. "I don't know you." "You know enough." She thought about Glenn Hopper in her cubicle doorway. She thought about the documents she had spent the last 3 evenings photographing and backing up to an encrypted drive she kept in the bottom of a winter coat in her closet at home. She thought about the fact that someone on the 44th floor had made 3 of her reports disappear, and that person almost certainly knew she had been called into the meeting with Roman Varro, and that her 9 minutes away rideshare was a car connected to an app, connected to a digital footprint. She got in. The car was silent for a while. Not uncomfortable. Roman Varro was, Nadia was coming to understand, someone for whom silence was a natural state rather than an awkward gap that needed filling. He looked out the window. She looked at her hands. "The mole," she said finally. "It's someone with access to the compliance threshold settings and the quarterly rotation schedule. That narrows it to 11 people. 8, he said. We've already cleared 3. "Which 3? He told her. She processed that. "Then it's either Hopper or someone above Hopper. Yes, which means Harriet Bloom is a possibility. Yes. She looked at him. You already know who it is, don't you? He didn't answer immediately. Outside, the city moved past in lights and glass. I have a strong suspicion, he said. What I need is evidence that holds. What I have on my encrypted drive might be enough for a civil case, not for what I need. She understood then that what he needed and a civil case existed in categorically different jurisdictions. What do you need? She asked. Access to the internal routing system. Not read access, write access. She was quiet for a moment. That's not something compliance analysts have. No, that's something the CFO's office has. Yes, and if Bloom is the mole, she'll notice the moment someone accesses it from outside her team. Which is why, he said, I need someone who can get in during a window when the access logs are being migrated to the new server infrastructure. There's a 40-minute period next Tuesday night when the system won't record new entries. Nadia looked at him. How do you know about the server migration? I know things, he said, and the way he said it this time was different from the parking lot. Warmer, almost like he was amused at himself. She almost smiled. She caught it. 40 minutes isn't much. It's enough if you know what you're looking for. And you think I know what I'm looking for? He turned and looked at her fully for the first time since they'd gotten in the car. I think you've known what you were looking for since March. I think you've been the only person in that building paying attention for at least 2 years. And I think Glenn Hopper telling you to leave the big picture to the adults is the single most incorrect assessment of a person I have heard in recent memory. The warmth that moved through her chest was embarrassing. She looked back at her hands. That's a lot of confidence in someone you met 3 days ago, she said. I do thorough background checks. She looked up sharply. Professional background, he said, and something in his expression was careful in a way that was almost gentle. Your compliance record, your flagged reports, your degree, summa cum laude, forensic accounting, the paper you published in 2019 on structured financial evasion patterns. A beat. It was very good. Nobody had ever described her 2019 forensic accounting paper as very good out loud to her face. Her thesis advisor had called it competent. A journal had rejected it. She had published it in a mid-tier academic review and basically forgotten about it. You read it, she said. I read it twice, he said. The problem with Roman Varro was that he had a way of looking at her that made her acutely aware of every room she had spent 6 years trying to disappear into. This was not comfortable. Disappearing had been a strategy she had developed carefully and deployed consistently, and it had served her well in the specific way that strategies that protect you from harm tend to serve you while also costing you something you can't quite name. He didn't look at her like she was invisible. He didn't look at her like she was unusual. He looked at her the way you look at something you have been searching for in a room full of the wrong things, and have finally, after a long time, found. She found this deeply inconvenient. There was also the practical matter of staying alive, which required focus. Tuesday came. The plan was specific. Nadia would access the Meridian system remotely through a FEN Romans team had set up, navigate to the CFO-level routing logs during the migration window, and extract the transaction pathway that would show definitively which internal account had authorized the quarterly diversions. Roman would be present, or rather his people would be present somewhere nearby, in a way that suggested their presence was more precautionary than optional. She sat in front of a laptop in a hotel room on the 32nd floor of a building 6 blocks from Meridian. Roman sat across the table from her, reading something on his phone and projecting the particular calm of someone who had decided long ago that anxiety was an inefficient use of resources. Window opens in 4 minutes, said one of his people, a compact, watchful man named Sable, who Nadia had decided she would like very much if she weren't trying not to like any of these people from his position near the door. I know, Nadia said. She cracked her knuckles. Then felt self-conscious about cracking her knuckles in front of Roman Varro. Then felt annoyed at herself for feeling self-conscious. "You're thinking about something," Roman said, without looking up from his phone. "I'm thinking about 17 things," she said. "I'm a forensic accountant. We're constitutionally incapable of thinking about fewer than 12 things at once." He did look up then. There was the thing again, that expression that had no clean category. 12 seems conservative, he said. "Window," said Sable. Nadia's hands moved. She had 23 minutes to find what she needed, and she found it in 19. The routing logs were structured in a way that would look, to a casual observer, like normal quarterly reconciliation entries. But Nadia was not a casual observer. She saw the pattern the way you see a face in a crowd, that you recognize before your brain has finished processing who it is. The particular timestamp signature. The 3-digit authorization code appended to each diversion. The account identifier that appeared exactly once in every quarterly cycle. She traced it back 18 months. Then she kept going, 24 months, 30, 36. "Roman," she said very carefully. He was at her shoulder before she finished saying his name. She pointed at the screen. He looked at it for a long moment. His stillness became a different kind of stillness, the kind that had weight to it. "That's not Bloom," she said. "No, that authorization code belongs to the CEO's executive access tier. Yes, which means—" "Ellison," he said. The name landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Theodore Ellison, the founder and CEO of Meridian Capital Partners. The man whose face was on the lobby wall in a portrait that was, she had always privately thought, slightly too large. "He's been running it for 3 years, Nadia said, still looking at the screen. "The syndicate isn't a threat to Meridian. Meridian is the syndicate." Roman's hand came down on the back of her chair, not on her, just near her, like he needed to anchor himself to something, and she happened to be the nearest solid thing. She pretended not to notice. 15 minutes of logs left, Sable said. "Download everything," Roman said. "All of it." Nadia was already doing it. At some point in the following hour, Glenn Hopper called her cell phone. She did not answer. At some point in the following 2 hours, she received a message from a Meridian internal account that should not have had her personal cell number, telling her that her services were no longer required and that she should report to HR at 9 a.m. She showed it to Roman. He handed the phone back to her. He said, "You won't be going." "I know," she said. He looked at her for a moment, and she had the feeling he was recalculating something. "They know you were in the system," he said. "Yes, but they don't know what I got, and by the time they know that, it won't matter." "Why?" "Because," she said, "I didn't just download the logs. I also sent a copy to 3 separate regulatory bodies, the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI, and a forensic accounting consultant in Chicago who has been investigating Meridian independently for 8 months and will recognize exactly what she's looking at." The silence that followed was, by Nadia's estimation, the best silence she had experienced in at least 6 years. "You did that," Roman said, "during the download. Multitasking," she said. "I told you, 12 things minimum." He made a sound she hadn't heard from him before. It took her a moment to recognize it was a laugh. Short, genuine, startled out of him like he hadn't fully planned it. What happened next took 10 days and involved federal warrants, a press release, and the quiet, efficient unraveling of a financial structure that had taken Theodore Ellison 3 years to build, and Nadia Osi approximately 19 minutes to fully expose. Ellison was arrested on a Thursday morning. The arrest was not public in the dramatic way arrests in movies tend to be. It was quiet and swift, and he went without shouting. The Gulf Coast Syndicate, deprived of its primary money corridor, collapsed in a way that caused Roman considerable satisfaction and a great deal of tidying up on his end that Nadia was not privy to and did not ask about. Glenn Hopper resigned. Harriet Bloom was placed on administrative leave, pending a separate investigation into what she had or hadn't known. Nadia sat in Roman's office on a Tuesday afternoon, a real office, in a building she would not have been able to name if she tried, with ceilings that were, in fact, quite high, and received an update on the status of everything from Sable, who delivered information with the specific efficiency of someone who understood that information was a resource and waste was disrespectful. When Sable left, it was just her and Roman. He was standing at the window. She was sitting in one of the 2 chairs across from his desk, which was clean in a way that suggested either extreme organization or the assistance of someone extremely organized on his behalf. "You should have been a principal," he said, without turning around. "A compliance analyst? No, a principal. Someone who makes decisions, not flags violations for other people to ignore." He did turn around then. "That's what you've been doing for 6 years. Making decisions about what mattered and handing them to people who didn't." She was quiet for a moment. Outside, the city was doing its ordinary city things. "What are you offering?" she said. "A position? Doing what? What you do?" "But for me, and with the authority to finish what you start." She looked at him across the clean desk and the high ceilings and the particular quality of afternoon light that comes through tall windows in the late part of the day. "That's a significant thing to offer someone you've known for 2 weeks, she said. 3 weeks, he corrected. 3 weeks. "I do thorough background checks," he said, and there was that quality again, careful and almost gentle, and underneath it, something warmer that he kept very contained. She thought about 6 years of fluorescent lighting and cubicle doorways and reports that disappeared. She thought about the Ashworth discrepancy and the Delacroix flag, and the look on Harriet Bloom's face when Nadia had walked into the 44th floor conference room, as though she was something minor that had managed, inexplicably, to get in. She thought about the 19 minutes on Tuesday night when she had found everything, and the way Roman had said download everything, with a certainty that had not sounded like instruction so much as it had sounded like he already knew she would. "You'll need someone to make sure your operation's financial structures hold up to any level of federal scrutiny," she said. "Yes. And someone who can audit your partners before you bring them in." "Yes. And someone with legitimate credentials who can testify as a professional expert witness if something goes to court. Preferably someone whose 2019 paper on structured financial evasion would be considered foundational reading on the subject," he said. She looked at him sharply. "It was not foundational reading. It will be," he said, "once I have my people cite it in the next 3 cases." She stared at him. He was not smiling exactly, but the edges of it were there. She thought, with a clarity that surprised her, that this was the most she had been seen in longer than she could comfortably calculate. "I want it in writing," she said, "obviously. And I want a window office." Something crossed his face. "Of course. And I'm keeping my encrypted drive for my own records. Nadia." He said her name the way he said most things. Direct, no extra weight, but landing precisely. "You could have walked out of this building the night of the download with enough information to do anything you wanted. You stayed. You sent the regulatory filings before I asked you to. You protected yourself and the case simultaneously." He paused. "I'm not worried about your encrypted drive." She picked up her bag. He was still watching her with that expression that had no clean category, and she still found it inconvenient, but it was a different kind of inconvenient than it had been 3 weeks ago, the kind that she was beginning to suspect she would prefer to the alternative. "The office needs to have a view," she said. "I've spent 6 years without one. South-facing," he said. 47th floor. Clear sight line to the river." She stood up. "I'll need that in writing too," she said. "First thing tomorrow," he said. She walked to the door. At the threshold she stopped, not turning around. "Roman, yes. The paper wasn't foundational. A beat, give it 6 months," he said. She left. Behind her, in the office with the high ceilings, Roman Varro stood at the window for a long time after she was gone, looking at the city and thinking about how thoroughly, in 3 weeks, a person could rearrange everything you thought you already understood about a room.